In 1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. In Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. And next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, my name is David Esrati. I'm running for Congress. I would like to first invite you to my pancake breakfast this Saturday at my house on Bonner Street. You can go to the website electesrati.com/events to find out the details. Basically from 9:30 until 1:30, I'll be making my amazing buttermilk pancakes with real maple syrup, some good sweet cream butter, none of that salted stuff. And there'll be coffee and there'll be orange juice. Now, a lot of people say, well, why don't you have sausage? Well, there's no pork in this politician. If you want pork, you're going to have to go over to Mike Turner. He's the king of pork, okay? But you can come down, you can make a donation, you can pick up a t-shirt, you can pick up a hat, you can pick up campaign literature to go out and talk to your friends and neighbors, and you can have some of the best pancakes you'll ever have. All right, that part's done. That's the business part. Second part, we're going to talk about user interface and user experience and why our government could use a graphic designer in Congress. Now, graphic design is only one of the things I've been doing, but people always say, your campaign literature looks so much different than everybody else's. And it's always interesting, and it's easy to read, and it has substance. Well, I can tell you that's from years of doing this for a living. And it didn't start just with me, after college. I've been doing this since I was about 12 years old when I started working at a stereo store on Coventry, which is the Haight-Ashbury of Cleveland Heights. But it was important to me that customers could sort of self-direct themselves to the right place so that we could start a conversation. And so I made signs to place on the equipment with price, product specs, and everything else, something that wasn't done at any of these audio stores anywhere in town. And the first thing that it helped with was helping identify for people who are overwhelmed seeing all this equipment, sort of what price range they were in. In fact, I made it a habit later always to set up like a good, better, and a best, and people would go towards the one that they felt comfortable with. Same thing goes for user interface. Same thing goes for user experience. You need to make it easy for the customer to solve their problems. If you do that, they take everything onto themselves and they don't have a problem. They're not unhappy, and they do things well. So there's recently been a lot of positive feedback about, I know it's the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness program, because the website is incredibly simple. It asks you to fill out a few things that you don't have to go look up anything, make a few assertions, hit send. It takes you less than a couple minutes, and you're done. Now, unfortunately, the PPP stuff, it was easy, but it wasn't that easy. And I can tell you from experience, switching from a sole proprietorship after 30 plus years in business to an LLC was a complete and total nightmare. And we're still working on it almost 2 years later, because there are so many different places where you have to enter your employer identification number and your service disabled veteran loan status and everything else. And all of these websites, all of them are horrific at trying to work it through. You want to seek absolute confusion, go to the system, the SAM site, sam.gov, to try to find contracts and figure out what you have to fill out for your registration. They ask you everything from like, do you own foreign flagged vessels? Do you have any spacecraft in orbit? I mean, these are things that just normal businesses don't do and could easily be solved by a simple question is like, is your business worth less than $1 million? That sort of, or even $10 million, because that would instantly solve the questions of whether you have foreign flagged vessels or spaceships in orbit. So, the first rule of good user interface design is that it should be clearly evident of what you're trying to do. Okay? If you need an example of that, IKEA is absolutely the first place to go and teach yourself, because all of their knockdown furniture comes with a set of instructions that gives you all the pieces and the parts and explains what you're going to need and how they go together. And it's all done in diagrams, so they don't have to worry about which language. That little marshmallow guy that they have working their way through it, he could be any country, any language. It doesn't matter. You're going to be able to put that bookcase together, no problem, and not be mystified or do it wrong. When there are good instructions and it's clear and everything is as expected, things go well. So you need an example of where government user interface design failed. Well, it's not that hard to go back to the 2000 presidential election, where somebody in southern Florida designed a ballot that people couldn't read. And a whole bunch of people in a heavily Democratic district voted for Pat Buchanan because they thought they were voting for Al Gore. It was called a butterfly ballot, and it didn't work. The design didn't work. None of it worked. Therefore, we ended up with George Bush as president. Crazy thing is, Al Gore didn't sit there and tell everybody the election was rigged or somebody screwed up or cried about it, or there was no refusal to transfer power. That came much later from somebody else. So, how do you figure out when your user interface is good or bad? Well, I can tell you this. If it's bad, you will have to correct a lot more people. And generally with the government, that involves fees and fines and sending out messages, error messages saying you screwed up. This happens constantly on government websites. You think you've done something right and they say, no, you screwed up, you got to go back and do it again. That is an indicator that somewhere the process is broken. Somewhere somebody didn't think about how easy it was to fill this out and make it work. And when that happens, it costs us money. It could cost a lot of money. It costs more money every time you have to go back and manage something that should have been self-evident. An example of this that is really, there's two websites that are incredibly complicated that should be, at this point, working on perfection if we actually thought about the user experience, okay, and how to design all this. One is with our courts and one is with medical records. So just in Montgomery County alone, we have 6 municipal courts, I think. We have a common pleas court. We've got, the appeals court. We've got federal courts. And every one of them has a different website and a different filing system and has different requirements for filing and a different interface for filing, as well as a different way to search and find things on the websites. This is incredibly costly. One, because you have to reteach every attorney for every different site on what to do or not to do. It makes it hard for journalists to find the documents they want to find because they may or may not be online. It makes it hard for defendants to find out what's going on. It makes it hard for other people on the case to find out. For instance, Kettering has a court system that doesn't post any documents online for public view. You can't actually download the documents, the dockets, the sentencing, anything else. You have to request it each time. So somebody is in there doing this. In the meantime, if you go to Montgomery County, they're all available online. So, little interesting tidbit here is Montgomery County actually rolled their own, designed it themselves, built it themselves, and according to most attorneys, they like it more than they like other websites in other counties and around the state. Pretty amazing, right? Well, I hear rumors that we are now going to go to a proprietary system. We are going to buy a commercially available system instead of continuing to use one that we actually built and own. Involved in that is also the transfer of all the data from the old system into the new system. And that's a big pile of money to do it. But we're going to do it because they don't think they can continue to maintain this thing, or they can't make it any better. They don't know how to keep improving it. Apparently the people that built it used older technology, then it's harder to move to newer technology for some reason, and they're very confused. There is no reason to move to proprietary tech. In the long run, it will cost you a lot more because you will be forever beholden to the person that owns the proprietary software. And I'm telling you, it's going to add up. So, some things that should be considered Okay, and these are simple things because we actually gave them a proposal at one point on how to rebuild this thing so it was easier to use. One of the simplest things you can do is color code things. So right now you just see a long list, like a spreadsheet of all the filings. Well, if you made all the filings by the defendant green, and all the filings by the plaintiff blue, and all the filings by the court red, all of a sudden it makes it much easier to digest what is happening and what the progress is and where you are. Color coding can be phenomenal. Now, as another issue you might have, color coding doesn't necessarily work with people with disabilities because blind people can't see one's color-coded red, one's color-coded blue, one's color-coded green. So you have to figure out some other ways to do that in addition, although you can still have the color codes work. But they're not going to do that. They're not going to work through these problems. They're going to just go and buy something off the shelf, which may or may not have solved some of these problems, because the problem is a lot of the times we leave this in the hands of elected officials who have absolutely zero tech skills or understand UX, UI, and experience design. That's where I'm a little different than the rest of them. Recently, the VA, who are pioneers in electronic medical records, their system went online around the turn of the century. They built it themselves using an awful lot of open source software. It has been added to over and over and over, and it's become one unwieldy mess. This is what happens when you sort of don't have a master strategy plan, and you have to keep adapting and adopting and changing and moving. And it's not only the VA that has these problems. Trust me. Google and Facebook have had multiple issues of moving their and modernizing their interface and the way they do things. I can tell you for a fact that the Facebook Business Manager has been through iteration after iteration, and it still sucks. Google has had multiple interventions on how to develop and deploy their tools as well. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We're early on in the computer information age. It moves incredibly fast, which throws a lot of people off. But if you want to know where we're at, we went from flying a biplane and Kitty Hawk in 1903 to flying to the moon in 1968. In terms of computing power, we have gone way faster in a span of 20 years than what they did in terms of the capabilities of flight. This is nothing new. So the VA had a system and it needed work. Instead of investing the billions into it that it would take, during the Trump administration, a decision was made to send it out for bid and to have it go to a proprietary system. And there are only a few large vendors of electronic medical records systems in the country. Little known fact, the VA would be any one of these companies, their largest client. There is no other healthcare system anywhere near the scope and scale of the VA in this country. Now, there are in other countries, in Great Britain, in Germany, there are all these countries that have large-scale healthcare systems, and they probably have EMR figured out. Truthfully, I haven't gone and researched it. But instead, the Trump administration has gone out and decided to spend billions on a bidder who already had just the Army's EMR. Now, they said, oh, then we can take the Army records and move them over, seamlessly to the VA system. Great and fine, but the Army's only one of the then 4 branches, now 5 branches of the military. I mean, you have the Coast Guard, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Army, and now the Space Force. But the issue also becomes, what do you do with the historical data, which is huge, that you now have to move into this system. And it's an incredibly expensive process. And it's literally, people's lives depend on it. So there's no room for errors or mistakes, and it's going to take a long time to do this. What we really should have been considering was, how do we build a national electronic medical record system that is owned by the public, to serve the public, to work for the public. I don't care which private corporation you are and what license you think you have on public records and on medical records or court records. Some of these things should belong to the people. If we do this right, we save money and we have a better system. So, other examples. We have this thing called payroll taxes. Payroll taxes have gotten more and more complicated as the years have gone by. Don't ask me why or how, but it's gotten to the point where there's quarterly filings, weekly filings, monthly filings, bi-monthly filings. There are all these things, and somehow what used to be pretty simple, now we have to charge businesses in order to get it right. There is no reason you should be taxed on paying taxes. The government should build an interface and provide it for free for businesses to be able to file their payroll taxes without any problems. And not only does it make it easier and cheaper for businesses, it makes it easier and cheaper for reporting to the IRS and doing your taxes when it comes time to do them. Which brings me to the other point that I've been making that people seem to think is not that important, but I think is very important. Why do we have the tax deadlines that we have? Why can't we move it to month by month by month by month, different deadlines for different people? That way, people in the tax industry have year-round work that's all not piled up in one spot. That way, we have much simpler tracking of these things. I mean, you don't do it with your driver's licenses. You don't do it with your license plates. You don't do it with anything else that everything's due on April 15th. Why should we do our income taxes that way? In many countries, there is no tax filing at all. Your taxes are tabulated with every pay period. It shouldn't be anywhere near as complicated as it is. Now, this sounds like a really boring subject to some people, but when it comes time to figure out who is going to run for office, what office they're running for, what the requirements are, what it takes to get on the ballot, what it takes to be removed from office, these things aren't readily available either. The user interface of our political ballot access suck and could be really improved. Same thing goes for our information about donations to political campaigns. Right now it's self-reported and it ends up with garbage in, garbage out problems where nobody can track these things. That's why I believe in a donor information system where all the donation, you register to give money, and then every donation you make, you register in real time, you pay it through the portal, and then the government distributes it to the candidates on a debit card where then you can see every expense they make as well. What a difference it would make. How much easier it would be to report these things. We're not doing anything of the sort. We're keeping it that way on purpose. So, donor registration systems, voter information systems, these are the things that are necessary to help educate and make it easier for voters to decide, especially when you move to ranked choice voting, which gives voters a lot more choices, and they get to rank their candidates in order of preference, which has the effect of moving people more to the center. The biggest number of people that agree on this candidate is the one that they find the least stinky is generally going to be the one that is going to win when you have ranked choice voting. And the voters are better informed because there is a voter information system that tells them things about the candidates. And it's not all up to the candidates to do it on a postcard like this, or a yard sign, or a bad TV ad like, quote, taxing Tim Ryan, end quote. I don't see any questions from anybody, and I don't see any comments on Facebook, so this is the idea here. It's live, it's interactive, it gives you an opportunity to ask questions and talk to your potential congressman so that you know what's going on in government. I've heard over and over and over that people say government can't do things right, can't do things, efficiently. And it's, sometimes it is true. But we don't have an office of user experience in our government. We don't have people working to resolve problems, the sticking points of interacting with government. We could have one, but we don't. Coming back to the court site, I talked to the Supreme Court justice candidates today and talked to them about this, and Ohio's been working on it for several years of having a unified system, at least for felonies. One of the things that they said was, right now, if you ask how many people are on post-release control in Ohio, there is no one place to go look and find this out. You actually have to contact 88 different counties to get the answers and to get there. That is not the way this is supposed to work. There are lots of reasons for having these integrated systems to make it easier for attorneys, make it easier for the plaintiffs, the defendants, everybody to be able to track this stuff and have it available easily. It saves money is one of the main ones. So, that's it. That's my TED Talk on user interface design in government. I don't have anything else for you today other than remind you about the pancake breakfast on Saturday at my house from 9:30 to 1:30. Any donation is welcome and what will be well received and put to use for the final push. We're down to 2 weeks and a wake up, and we will know who your next congressman is on November 8th, really late at night, or November 9th in the middle of the morning. And you will decide whether you want billionaires buying your candidate and military-industrial complex, or you want somebody who's going to work for you and talk to you and interact with you every single weekday, tell you what happened in Congress, tell you why I did what I did, tell you what's coming up, ask for insights, ask for feedback, just like I'm doing right now. So, that'll be up to you. Please like and subscribe. Hit that little notify bell on YouTube so that you can be made aware of every time we go live. I see Lynn Lamant saying she voted for me today. Thank you, Lynn. That means the world to me. Please tell all your friends and tell them why it's so important. Because quite frankly, I'll never compete with the 1,400,000 or 1,500,000 that Mike Turner has raised. I will never be one that'll be vindictive to people if they don't vote my way or kiss my grits or kiss my ring. I am here not to be a Democrat, not to be a Republican, but to be your elected representative to Congress so we can work together to get the government we want, the government we deserve, the government we need, not one that's owned by the billionaires. Thank you so much, and we will see you tomorrow at 4. Thank you.